Is there likely to be one of these sections in particular that, or should I just pick any one?
Probably on the bottom that says hate to it.
This one. Oh, this one. Oh, no, that one.
Yeah, that one. On top.
You're recording already. See you later. You'll be playing on YouTube later, editing that. Well, you're going to become a star. You'll start watching that hit list. See how many times you've been watched.
So, sorry, were you Amy or Becky?
Amy.
Amy, okay. I'll just put it in your folder. And so particular, oh no, that's fine. Okay, let's just...
Larissa's a good general one if you want to use that.
I guess number of focus steps is the only thing it will change, but it sort of looks...
Larissa's set to 7.
7 then. How thick did you say the sections are?
13 microns.
Okay,
Yeah.
so 13 microns. Let's just have a look. Is that what they normally look like?
Yeah,
okay.
they know.
These are all the positive cells here, aren't
yeah.
they? So I just want to just have a quick look here. It's just sort of make an estimation of where the depth of the usable information is.
Yeah.
So that's where it would put it itself using autofocus. So the question is how far above and below that is the other reason. So let's just have a look. So if I'm going to go up and down in a micron at a time though. So 1, 2, 3. So 3, any more than 3 down is overkill, I'd say.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3 back to the middle. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, so about 6 microns.
Okay.
I would have guessed before starting that approximately half or a little bit more of the total thickness is our useful information. So about 6 microns. Let's go for 7 to make sure. And to me, as I'm stepping up and down there a micron at a time, there's no need to step up on any more finer steps. So yeah, when you capture them manually using those steps, have you done that just on a single microscope? Have you done those stacks there? Or?
No.
No, okay, I just wondered how you did it there. Okay. So let's get it to do 7 at a micron apart. So about the middle point of where it thinks the focus is.
Yeah.
Let's just have a look at them all. So I'll just leave that going now, and then we can have a look at that later on.
Yeah, no, cool.
That ticking noise on the video there. Right, so anyway, we're going to look at Histocom. Shall I just move that way a little bit so you can see it a little bit better? Can you see that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can see it.
Okay. Oops, I just want to get rid of that. Right. Okay, who do we want to start with first? Who do we think will be easiest? So, let's tell you what, just tell me a little bit about each one. So, first of all, so this is one of Amy's, and then yours one here. Whereabouts in here are they?
In the slide.
That one there.
There's two different things. Yeah.
So that's one of them.
The other one.
That's the other one. Okay, so just briefly, just what's the interesting stuff in here, is it?
Some of them look great. I'll just choose on my own.
Okay, so what are we doing in here?
We want to quantify, if possible, the red staining. Can you do it as a percentage of areas? I don't know if that's
so is it as a percentage of which areas? So within here or within that total ring?
Yes.
Okay, so what you'd look at is this area here.
Yeah.
And then you want to know within that, just how much of it is red?
How much of it is stained red, yeah.
How much of it is stained red even bearing in mind that there's all this just empty non-tissue. Is this non-tissue here, or is it?
It's a ring, yes, it's an artery.
Oh right.
Yeah,
Okay.
so
Right. Okay. So this is okay. I get it. So this is one piece of tissue,
one
effectively.
tissue, yeah.
With
the lumen is the whole.
But you just want to. And is this red okay here to count as well?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just any red. So if we were to draw a circle around the outside there, it's just how much of it's red.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. That sounds doable, I think. And on this one, is it the similar sort of exercise?
This is just the nuclei, so like it's probably pretty similar to.
So this again, is it just how much pink within the total thing?
So like it's the nuclei. So
oh right, sorry, let's have a look.
Purple. Yeah.
So it's what within the ring? How many of them are there?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And okay, that's fine. And then the third one is yours, isn't it? So in here, I think we've already talked about it. We're looking at.
Yeah, so those are actually brain sections are not the easiest to look at because
okay.
that particular
that's fine.
sequencing. But yeah,
so these are the positives, are they?
Yeah.
So you just want to know in this section here, the whole section or areas?
No, so it would be areas because it'd be like distinct.
Okay, that's fine. So you can tell us which areas.
Yeah.
And then within those areas, so for the sake of argument, you might say here's an area here, and you want to just know how many of these positive nuclei are there in there. Yeah. Okay. Okay, well, should we start with this one as it's on screen? So, the first thing with histoquant is it works on areas you mark. There is the option to run on the entire slide, but the best way to do it normally is to work with areas that you mark. So, in your case, that might be where we just draw around each one of the sections. It's just like 5 marks on the slide if there are 5 sections. In your case, it may be more a case of you mark. Have you already marked this up at all?
No.
I did try practicing on one of these, but tried to do the whole slide. Yeah. And it got to about 690, and then it.
No, the secret is one of the things to do. Just stop it. Okay, interesting. There's 2 things. It's better in my experience, even if you're doing the whole slide, to just take a minute just to mark the bit of tissue, because all the bit in between with bits of dust that you can't really see by and all that still have to be processed.
Yeah, it just sort of froze.
And my other experience is that the further a field that's being analysed is from the real thing that you want to analyse, the more it just slows it down as if they're going, oh, I don't know what to do here. So that's why I say, even if the tissue occupies a large amount of slide, it's still generally better to mark reasonably precisely the actual tissue. Okay, so the first thing is, so is this caption just playing, or is this an actual representative area that you might count in?
It could be, yeah, we call it GI.
Okay, so you just see how. So the first thing is when training histoquant, the recommendation is that when training it and tweaking stuff, is to operate on smaller images that are probably no bigger than about 300 microns squared. When you're looking at, say, 1:1. So for instance, if I go 1:1 here, I can see if I just select the measure distance tool that across there is about 300 microns actually. So an area about that when you're 1:1 is a good place to start when setting it up. But also, obviously, it needs to be representative. So let's just have a look. So, for instance, in this area here, are there actually many positives? Yeah, there's some positives here, aren't there? Yeah. So, how big was that box? I can't remember already. So, that's a little bit big, I'd say. So let's make a box within that, probably about half the size of that. And that, so if I do a box like that, for instance, that's got a few positives for us to play with. And we'll just call that, I don't know, HQ train. For histoquant train. And the other reason why it's important to put, well, it's a good idea to put something in here rather than just caption, is that if you subsequently later on, for instance, export a CSV file or a spreadsheet file with some data on, each line with different counts and things in will have whatever you've typed, will be labelled with whatever is there. So it makes sense when you're marking them, therefore, to call them something, or whether it's section 1, section 2.
Had you delete box.
Okay, if you just click on...
Because even if you don't save
yeah.
it stays there.
Yeah, if you click on Manage Annotations up the top here,
right,
and then just select one, so say we want to get rid of that caption one, then you can just delete it. Right. And if there's 20 there that you want to get rid of in one go, then you can just highlight the first one, highlight the last one, hold down Shift,
right,
and then delete them all in one go. And if you want to go back and label it afterwards, because you didn't label it to begin with, in here you can also click Edit, and you can again have access to that to change that. As I say, it makes no difference if we just leave it as caption, 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 but when you get some data out later, it makes a lot more sense if they've got a sensible name. Okay, so we've labelled that. That one's just disappeared because I deleted it. So the next stage is to click on the little one up here. So, sorry, to make something clear, so the marking up is obviously you can do in the free viewer. So you can do that back at your desk wherever you're sitting. You can do all that marking up. It's only when you subsequently want to either train Histocom or run Histocom that you need to be on the PC. You've actually got the software license on it. And what we'll talk about at the end as well is batch processing, where you can, for instance, run Histocom, leave Histocom running overnight or lunchtime, whatever, on a number of slides, and they could be running different algorithms as well. So some could be yours, some could be yours. So the idea there being that you can mark up your areas that you want the count to be done in back at your desk or whatever, and in theory, Roger or you or anyone else can come along and just put them in a queue and leave them all processing in one go. That makes sense. So you'll see some of these are greyed out. That's because these are other bits of software that you don't have access to at the moment. And the only other thing you see on this screen, apart from the Histocom button, is this Delete Measurements button. And what that does is that actually does what it says on the box. So that actually will remove any Histocom measurements from the slide. Because when you make measurements, they are saved in the slide file. If you've been messing around and you decide that what's on there is complete rubbish and you'd rather just start from scratch again, then that just allows you to delete them from there. And it looks like there's a new function I've not noticed before, which is select specific measurements. Yeah, but that will actually show you a list of the measurements on this current slide, and allow you to just delete some of them if you want. So, is this one you've been playing around with before, Roger? It looks like there is a measurement on there, maybe.
Yeah, I've had a couple.
Okay. Is that a genuine measurement, or should I just get rid of it? Just get rid of it. Okay. Okay, so we're going to get. Okay, cool. So we're going to go into. Sorry. Open up Histocom. And the first thing you see here is at the top is they call it a profile definition. It's basically the set of settings you're going to use. So I think in this instance we'll start from scratch. So what it says here at this stage actually doesn't matter. And then it asks us to say what are we actually going to be playing with. So that's my Histocom train one. So I can either double click that, or I can select it and use the arrow button and I can push it to the right there. If I was selecting to do several process on this screen, several annotations on the slide, I may be adding several here, but in this case it's just my training one. And stuff at the bottom will come on to later. So now if I just hit profile setup, and by the way, if I were to do hit profile setup with nothing in there, it would complain and go, please can you select an annotation first of all. So we're going to be starting from scratch here, so I'm going to select create new profile. And the first stage is the option to apply one of these filters. So what this does, if you can imagine when we're trying to count in your case nuclei here, you know, this looks pretty round to us, but to the computer, if you zoomed in a bit more, you would see that it's got sort of uneven edges and pixels, and especially if it's out of focus or just depending on how small it is compared to the resolution of the system. So what is quite useful sometimes when counting, particularly things like nuclei, other round features, for instance, is just to sort of smooth it all out a bit. It has the effect of making the image look a bit blurred and out of focus, but from an analysis point of view, it actually makes it a bit easier for the software. And so there's two options here, and to be honest with you, it's a little bit of a case of trial and error as to sort of which one works. The first one, the median filter, if you use that, and as you slide it up here, you see the effect it has. It's quite a subtle, just sort of softening of the image. So I'd say this one doesn't need an awful lot doing to it. If I use the Gauss filter, for instance, that's a much harsher softening and also is quite good at removing noise. So I don't know, maybe if you had, I don't know, some darkly stained stuff on very light background or something, you might find that useful because it will just differentiate it more from the background. But it is a little bit a case of trial and error. So you see, if I put that all the way up to maximum, it softens it to a high degree. Because this is very sort of brown and not you don't see the effect of the noise removal very much, to be honest. But so I think what I'm going to try here just for now, I'm just going to try the first one, which just softens it slightly, and just a few clicks of that. We can always jump back and forward, change it, and see the effect of it anyway. Okay. So on the next screen, we get on to actually identifying what is it we want to count or quantify. So the basic principle here is that there's two principles really. Is number one, which is layers. So in histoquant, you have multiple layers. You might, if you play with Photoshop or something, you get the concept of different layers. And the point is that for each layer is a different thing that you're counting or quantifying that you might want different data about. You can have one layer, or you can have several layers, and within that layer, the primary way you're identifying the object is on colour, and then secondarily, there's a little bit of filtering them down by the size as well. So, if I just call this first layer positive, does that make sense? And then the way I identify what I'm interested in is simply just by clicking on it. So you see, every time I click on it, it highlights it, and it also starts to highlight other things in the same area that we're looking at the moment that it considers to be the same in terms of colour. And if you want to know what it's actually doing here, if you click on the Advanced button here, what you see is a way of expressing colour. So there are two ways. So most people probably know about RGB, red, green, blue. Every colour is a combination of red, green and blue. And then there's a second method, which is HSV, which I think stands for hue, saturation and volume. And this is they call it another colour space. It's another way of expressing colour. So hue, I think, is like, if you look at the sky and go, well, it's all blue, but there's different shades of blue. Hue's a way of measuring that. Saturation, I think, is more a measure of, it could be that hue of blue, but how saturated is it? And volume, I must admit, I can't remember the exact definition of it. Again, there's two methods, because you may find on some samples one method is better at pulling out the particular object of interest than the other. I find on a very, very high percentage of times HSV is the way to go, and I only ever start playing with RGB if I'm really, really struggling with HSV, to be honest. But what you see is every time I click onto it, so if I click on completely the wrong thing here, what you see is these sliders are moving. So it's coming up with a range of values for HS and V that link to the colours that you're interested in. So I've done something stupid there. So what you see here are these backwards and forward buttons, just like in Word, etc. So if I just click back there, we'll just go back, and I'll keep going back, obviously, all the way to the beginning. And I can go forward as far as I was before. All the way to there. So the other things on here are at the top you see just the mask colour here. This is just the colour you see here. So red's okay in this case, but sometimes if you're marking pink cells and a highlight of pink, it's sometimes difficult to see what's going on. So if you just click on that, you can just select a different colour if you like. And the thing you see next to that is mask or outline. So mask, as you see, fills in the whole thing. Outline just draws it. I prefer outline. It actually allows you to see what's going on behind. And then the other thing I say, and this is especially useful for things like nuclear counts, if you click the fill button, then what it actually does, so if you look here, for instance, below a certain size threshold, I think it is, which I can't remember, it just assumes it to be one object. So if you're marking something like cytoplasmic background, say, not really necessarily relevant, but if you've got nice regular shapes like this, because otherwise you can sit there and go, oh, why is it not considered that one, trying to click more and more in the middle and that type of thing. So that there is considered as one object, that's one object, that's one object, that's one object, etc. And there are tools at the bottom here like zoom in and zoom out, etc. If you want to see a bit more precisely what's going on, or click a bit more precisely. So the other thing you see under advanced here is the picker size. So this affects, if you think of this picker as just like in Photoshop, you know, like a what do you call it, a syringe thing where this is just the size of that. So if you're trying to mark really little things, then put that down a bit. If you're trying to mark quite big things, and they're such a different colour from everything else that learning from precision isn't that important, then put it up a little bit. So we look at these now. That's a true positive there, isn't it? I think, for instance.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is obviously not being picked because of the colours I picked. So let's click on that a bit more. Okay. So don't be complaining about. Oh, is that the microphone just falling down there? Oops. It wasn't deliberate. Yes. Don't worry too much about these little sort of false positive dots in between at the moment, because we can get rid of those in a moment. And also don't worry too much about if we join together, say, two positives because they're next to each other, because we can also worry about that in a moment. But the question to start with at this stage is, are we fundamentally marking up the areas that are the colour of the positive objects? I mean, so for instance here, have we ended up going into things that are the wrong shade, or is it just that they're the same shade but the wrong shape or size, do you think? So that colour-wise, you'd mark that as a positive, I guess, but it's not actually, obviously, is it?
Yeah, no.
Yeah. Oops, clicked the wrong thing there, so I'll just undo that. So let's just go back a step a moment. So, and the other thing I notice here is we're sort of getting quite jaggedy edges here, which isn't very neat and tidy in terms of, whereas our real positives are a bit smoother and rounder, aren't they? So what we might find is if we just click back here, it won't forget what we've done on that screen, and maybe just put the smoothing filter up quite a lot. When we go back to here, you see some of them a bit smoother, or what we might find is if we go back to here and try the other filter, and then go forward. Okay, it's not making a massive amount of difference in this case. Some of them are a little bit rounder, but it's not. Okay, so all we've seen there is that frame-based filters in this particular sample is not making a massive amount of difference. So at the moment, as far as I see it, we've got the positives, and we've got false negatives in terms of small things which aren't really, and then we've got some things like this which are also not correct, I would say, aren't we? So maybe actually let's just go back a step, because they came in there. So at this stage, what else would you see as positive? This sort of thing? Okay. So it's here, isn't it?
Yeah. Like I said, it's really tricky.
Yeah, it's quite difficult, isn't it? It's brown on brown, isn't it? So, okay, so we look around now. What I'd say, yes, yes. So that's yes, isn't it? Yes, 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 yes. Is that positive? Just out of focus a bit, maybe? Yeah. Is that positive just out of focus a bit?
Sure, you can't tell with that really.
What would you do if you were following this manually? What would you do now?
I'd probably leave it.
Would you dial the focus on the microscope?
Oh,
or would you just leave it?
I'd play through the mic, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Rather than doing it on the microscope, yeah.
Okay, but that would be a yes, I guess.
Yeah.
That would be questionable, I think, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
And these little things. Okay, so let's try something else now. Let's filter by size and see how close to what you count we can get. So, little trick you can do. Do you know what size is nuclear, or should we find out? Okay. So what you can do now is, it's a little bit jumping about a little bit, but if I just click on the main viewer button again, that's still running in the background. And if I just zoom in and just have a look at one of these, for instance, so that's a good example of a positive, isn't it, I think? So if I just, we should have done this at the beginning probably, to be honest, but if I just mark around there. Do you know about these annotation tools already?
No.
Okay. So okay, shall I just quickly mention these then, as to take a step back? So you know about opening slides, moving around the slides, I guess already. Yeah. what you see up here is my annotation tools. So the square one is the one I used earlier to mark the whole rectangle. Just click on it, drag it out into the appropriate area. The one next to it is this freehand one, so that's just to click on it, and it's just you can either hold the left mouse button down and draw around it, or you can click, 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 click around it. Like that. And then if I click on this Manage Annotations button here, that we did earlier, we'll see them here. So these are the ones I've just marked.
Okay.
And we can see that the areas, this one's 51 micron square, this one's 59, this is 46. So it looks like a true positive, a typical, maybe an area range between 35 micron squared and 70 or something like that might be a good boundary there. So I just go back to histoquant here. What you'll see here is I can filter by size, and I can say valid object size is between 35 micron squared and 70, and then I'm just hitting tab or enter after I put in each number. And now what you see is it's only showing me the ones that both fulfill the colour criteria and fulfill the size criteria that we've put in. So now we're getting closer, I think. Might not be completely there yet, but we're getting closer to, in this particular area, a representative count, aren't we? So would you say true, 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 all these, what about these ones up here? Probably?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, okay. As I said, I'm not expecting to get the exact number the same as you, but hoping to get a chance. Interesting on this one, but that's a definite positive, isn't it? So if I just temporarily turn on filter by size, we can just check. Right, so that is being highlighted by colour, but when I turn on filter by size, it's disappearing. So that, I suspect, well, I can tell, it's bigger, isn't it?
Yeah.
So maybe we just need to put the size criteria up a little bit. So let's put it up to maybe 80. Still not pulling it in, so let's try 100. Yeah, so that pulls that in. Okay. What I would say as well is, so what we're doing at the moment is we've just hit one area in one slide. If you want to move towards the position of using histoquant in anger on lots of samples, what I normally say to people is, so you need to hone it over time. So you need to, and over slides as well. So maybe pull out some 2 or 3 slides which are good representative samples, scan them, mark up the training area, a couple of training areas on each one of them, and then open each of them up in the training screen here and just modify the parameters and just do a little bit of back to and fro until you find a set of settings that averages out nicely across them, because of course you will get a little bit of difference in staying intensity and quality and that over slides made at different times. So now where are we now? So I think now we do seem to have these little objects start, like, is that positive just falling off the top of the screen there, do you think? Or possibly. These seem to be some very small objects here, which it's interesting. Well, that's a generally false positive, isn't it?
Yeah.
I wonder whether we could actually go up on the minimum size criteria a little bit here. Because the smallest one, I think, on the other screen we measured was 48.
Yeah.
Well, that's got rid of some real positives, hasn't it? Because those you'd class as true, wouldn't you? I think. The other question is should we be highlighting? Yeah, maybe we should just be changing the colour values to pull in a bit more around these. So, for instance, okay, that's got all the positives and a lot of rubbish. But if we do the size again.
Yeah, okay.
Now we're getting things like this, which are, we've gone too far in the colour there, I think, haven't we? So let's just go back a step. So actually, at that, do you think the error rate there is fairly low on that area? I think the next thing to do is obviously to try on a bigger area to see how far out we are. Okay, so and is there anything else in this sample that you want to count or measure, or is that it?
No, that was just it.
That's it, okay. If there was, we could click the plus sign here. So just as an example here, say these white pockets meant something. we could now add a second layer here, just call it white or something, and we could start marking up, say, the white areas. And we could say do a second set of measurements for them or something. But I'll delete that for now because we don't want to know about that. Okay, so then we can click next. So on the next screen you have two things. First one is an object separation. Is it very common? Do you often get in these sort of samples, for instance, two positive nuclei actually sitting next to each other or on top of each other? Or?
Not really.
No, not really. Okay, so it's an unnecessary step in here. What this does is, if you do get things like this, what that does is where they end up merged. So say these two here were actually right next to each other. What that would do is, if you imagine sort of highlighting with one object and eroding the edges down and down and down, and the principle being that by eroding the edges of two circles like that, you'll get to the centre of each of them. What you then set here effectively is the distance between that centre point. And so what you say is if that distance is over a certain number, you consider that separate them out as two objects. So that works quite well, nicely, as I say, where you've got a nuclei, for instance, sitting on top of each other, or just on top of it. And then if you do that, there's just a second filter by size here. So that's exactly the same as this one here. But obviously you can imagine if you separate things out, you might then need to filter by size, either by different criteria, or more often than not, just by the same numbers as before. So if we go to the final screen now, so when you actually run Histocom, it measures a whole bunch of stuff. And it measures a whole bunch of stuff, whether you like it or not, independent of what you do. What you're setting on this screen here is, if you choose to have an output file of the data, what columns actually get put in there. So as you see, and there are two types of parameters as well. There's object specific and field specific. So object specific, each one of these is an object. Okay, so you've got things like you would get the area of every one. You could potentially have the area of every object. So object 1, the area is 25. Object 2 is object 1. And along with these other perimeters, there's a perimeter. And if you look in the manual in the appendix here, there's a list of them because I can never remember more than about 2 of them, to be honest. But if you look at objects, you've got area, red, green, and blue intensities, perimeter, shortest diameter, shape factor. And the thing I'd say about some of these parameters, you think, why do I want to know that? But this is where you might think in future about some more sort of different ways of interpreting stuff. So for example, I don't know, maybe you're doing something to your samples that damages the nuclei. And you might come to the conclusion by looking at some of them that the ones which have the higher dosage or were damaged more or whatever, they're always less perfectly circular than the undamaged cells, for instance. So you might say, okay, it's actually interesting to have the shape factor of the detected object, for instance, or the of course. Or you might find, for instance, that depending on what you're doing to the samples, the darker ones are more important of all the ones you're selecting. And for instance, something like the grey intensity or for a particular type of stain, the red intensity might indicate that also. So it's just worth bearing those, if you're thinking about how can I get to where I want to here, it's not always a case of mimicking exactly what you might do manually. It might be a case of going, well, based upon the possible measurement, which one is actually a really good indicator of, and there's ways which we'll look at in a moment of how you can sort of help yourself get to that point. So then you have the field specific. So the field specific ones are for a given area, that we mark using the annotation. Those are field specific. So there you have, for instance, the overall area of the field. So that is quite often important because sometimes people go, well, I want to say in a standard area, how many cells are there? Now, unfortunately, as it stands at the moment, there's no way of drawing the same size annotation every time. But if you know the size of the annotation and you know how many cells are in it, then you can normalise the data very easily. because it doesn't matter whether one is twice as big as the other, because as long as you know that one area is twice as big. And then you have a whole bunch of other things. So you have, for instance, things like number of detected objects per millimetre squared. So that actually more or less actually gives you that anyway. The overall mask area, for instance, just gives you not the area of the whole thing you marked, but the area of all the detected objects. So, for instance, if you were detecting like cytoplasmic staining or something, that might be more interesting than how many objects there are. And then you've got things like the mask area divided by the object area, etc. Different colour and grey intensities, which, as I said, are sometimes useful in working different things out. Things like standard deviation of detected objects within the area. So I would just say, at some point, just have, depending on what you're trying to quantify, pick your time, just look through these and say, oh, that's actually the exact thing I want to know, or that indicates the thing I want to know. Does that make sense? Yeah. I'd say they're just in the appendix at the back of the manual. So for this, do we really want to know any object-specific things? You don't really. You're not bothered, are you, about any? Is there any particular information about an individual nuclei that you want to know?
No, I don't think so.
Right. Okay. So I'm just going to click the arrow button there just to take them all out of the list. And field specific. So I would guess it's good to know the area that you're measuring in. It's good to know the number of detected objects, because that's the number of nuclei for you, isn't it? And then the question is what other things might you be interested in? So, let's have a look through here. So this is where it gets a little bit confusing. Within this field specific, there are actually two lots. There are summing parameters for the whole area. So if you have multiple layers, this becomes more confusing if you have multiple layers. If you have multiple layers and you're counting blue nukes in layer A and red nukes in layer B, then NO would give you the sum of the two.
Yes.
But, where is it? NOL would give you a count of each of them, number of objects in each layer.
Yes.
So it's just a little bit, because I've caught myself out a few times here where I've been counting multiple things, and I thought, I can see there's 12 there, why is it saying there's 15? And it's because it's summing the two. So in your case here, I think NO is absolutely fine. But if you start getting into more complex things like different types and ratio of one to the other, then it's important to actually read the exact definition in the manual here of what that parameter is and pick exactly the right one. So apart from that, is there anything else that's really of interest? Would it be interesting, FNO, frequency of detected objects per millimetre squared? That effectively normalises it for the area.
Yeah, possibly, yeah. Probably.
So we can put that in. As I say, it measures everything every time anyway. This is the case of what it puts in the output file. So we're happy that that's all we want to measure. We can just hit save and exit now, and we'll give it a name. So shall I put this in your folder? So it's, I've forgotten again. Amy, two people. So shall I just call this? What do you want to call it? Cell count or something? Yeah. Okay, there we go. Okay, so from this point on, we could run it on that little area. That all it would do would measure exactly what we already tell it to measure, so it wouldn't learn anything new. So probably the next thing to do is to pick a bigger area, run it on that, and see whether we think we've, based on the area we chose to train it on, we're going roughly in the right direction. So at the moment I haven't got anything marked up, so I'm just going to close that temporarily. And so I'll tell you what, could you just mark on here for me? You said you would mark specific areas. So why don't you just mark an area that might be a true area that you'd pick.
Alright,
so
cool.
do you want to do a square or do you want to do a freehand?
I'll probably do a freehand.
Okay, so if you click on the freehand tool there, and then as I said, you can either hold down the left mouse button and just draw around, or you can keep clicking to
Yeah,
mark.
okay. So I'll probably do something like that.
And then right click to finish. And then we'll give that a name. What should we call
it? Call it the GI.
Okay. And a little tip actually when using annotation tools, which is quite useful, especially when you're zoomed in like this, is at the moment you see wherever I click it starts saying annotations, and I want to do an annotation. You know that this hand tool puts you back in the sort of moving the slide around, zooming in and zooming out. But if you're in another tool like annotation, for instance, if you just hold down Control, then it reverts back to the pan tool. It's especially useful, you see, when you're in this position and you're annotating precisely. Say, oh, I want to go over here. Just hold down Control, drag it over, let go of Control, and you're back in that tool without having to go which button is it up here and all this sort of thing. Okay, so we'll just go back into here. I could probably let this open actually and just come back. So we're going to Histocom. And it's still remembering the algorithm from before, so we'll just click Browse here first of all and pick up yours. And we'll just select the GI annotation, so I'll just click it there. I can either use the arrow as I said, or I can just double click and it flips across to the right hand side. And then this down here is where it defines if you want these export files. So I apologise here, there's a slight confusion in the language here, which will eventually get changed. Where it says region here, this is what on the other screen was called field specific. So region here is the whole area, which was on the other screen unfortunately referred to as field specific. And cumulative, I think. I will check on this. We'll generate them all. I'll double check this because I keep forgetting this. Is I think the object specific. I have asked for this to be changed many times, and it never seems to get changed. And then this third one here, save for single CSV. What this does is if you come back, so if you're doing a slide and then later on you're doing another slide or you're doing another area, what this does is this keeps appending it to that slide, so you get another line of measurements on one measurement. Where if you don't tick it, it will just generate a completely separate file every time. And then it just asks you where you want to put the file. So we'll also put that. It does, I think, remember the next time where you were last time too. I have to keep talking about it in there. So I just hit start now. That will process just that area. So, first of all, before we look at data files and things, the first thing you can do at this stage is if you click on the I button here and say show measurement annotations, that would just show you what is being measured. So this is maybe pretty, but more importantly at this stage, it just allows you to have a quick look and go, have we got the right idea here? So we could look at this and go, so do you think we're getting the right idea here? Or do we need to play around a bit?
It might need a bit of tweaking. But
yeah, no, I thought it would do at this stage.
Yeah.
So,
oh, they look about right.
Yeah.
They look
Okay.
okay.
These maybe it's a little bit more questionable,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Mainly because they're quite out of focus, I say.
Yeah.
I mean, those I'd say, to that.
Yeah.
You look at that. That's a positive. Okay, so what do we do about tweaking? So one of the ways I think is quite useful is if you click on this one here, the little graph, which is measurement visualization.
Yeah.
What this allows you to do is a number of things, but one of them is particularly useful from the tweaking point of view. So first of all, just check that you've got the right algorithm over here, because you could in theory have multiple algorithms run on the same slide. And then you've only got one area here to select. Now, if you click on the gallery here, and there's different layers here potentially, but you've only got one here, and show, and I'll just make this a bit bigger, what this shows you is what's been considered positive, and normally if I go like, let's set the border size to higher so you see more around the object. So this is actually what is just those individual objects that are considered positive.
Okay.
And you start to see quite how focused they are. But what this allows you to do is when I put my mouse over them, it shows you like the area, for instance.
Yeah.
So that's the most useful thing. So if you start looking at this, for instance, say you find some like that. It's not really positive, is it?
I think so.
So you can look at that and go, well, the area of that is 91, for instance.
Yeah.
That one's 64.
Yeah.
So you can look at these, and straight away you can start getting an idea in your head of, do I need to tweak that size parameter, for instance?
Okay.
Yeah, I suppose that brown there matches the brown we've.
Yeah.
These are heavily zoomed up, obviously.
Sorry, how did you get into that window?
Okay, so let me do it again.
Yeah.
So click on the little graph, which is
Yeah.
measurement visualization,
Yeah.
and then just select the annotation that I want to look at
Yeah.
before. So you can select multiple here. There are multiple annotations, and then just gallery,
Oh, gallery. Okay.
and then show, and then I just maximise it to make it a bit bigger.
Okay.
And then what I did was I increased the border size because that puts more of the surrounding area around them. And then when I just put my mouse over them, it just shows me that other information. So I would say for tweaking, the only one that is really useful here is the area. These other ones can be useful for something else, which we'll come on to. So maybe if we look through, which ones are trees? So these I'd say are all tree positives, aren't they? So that's like 46, 56, 47, 60, 60, 42. So everything so far is between about 40 and 60. What about that?
No.
No. That's a tree, I'd say, isn't it? So it's just under 40, about 40. False?
Yeah.
63. Would that be a tree, do you think?
I wouldn't count it.
No. Okay. 40. Well, that's some of these along here.
Number 16. Oh.
That's again is 95.
Yeah, 17 probably.
17.
Yeah, 17.
What that one there?
17 on below it.
27.
Yeah. Oh, is it? Oh, sorry.
Oh no, sorry, no, you're right, 17. Yeah, sorry, that's 7, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a false, isn't it?
Yeah. And then what was it, number 26? 20, yeah. Wouldn't count that.
17. So what I'd say is straight away is that most of the ones that you're considering true positives are between about just above 35 and nothing really higher than about 65. So that's a bit of information we could use to help. We'll go back into this in a moment. So what we can do is we just go back in here. I'm just going to delete the existing measurements. And not go into that one actually. Go back into the training one, because you always want to be messing around with a small area. You can look at several small areas, but only one, just now load in that profile. So at the moment we're considering everything between 35 and 100. So let's change that to actually 35 and say there was something like 63, 60. So we show 70.
Yeah.
Now that has taken out that one and that one. Would you consider those also positives?
Right under the top one positive.
Okay.
I'd say 6.
What I'd say there is if you look at the colour of that one, it's got a dark brown area and a light brown. Maybe we've actually selected a little bit too much light brown.
Yeah.
Maybe the correct way to do it is actually to go for the darker brown.
Yeah.
Are we missing any? Are we failing to put a marker on any positives still? I don't think we are. So when I go like this.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And that's because these have become sort of smaller objects, isn't it? How's that now? about this one here?
Yeah.
Well, that's almost like a big, that looks like the upper limits.
Yeah.
Maybe just up a little bit. Interesting. Okay.
That's good.
That's now better than we had before. Yeah, so coming down a little bit, but then taking away a little bit of the light brown a little bit. So we're only really focusing on the dark. So although here we're not marking the whole thing, I don't think we really care because we're marking it as a positive, aren't we? We're just looking at this one here. That's one really, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's being considered one at the moment, so that's okay. I'll just replace the other one there. Do you want to replace it? Yes. So now let's just run that on that GI area again and see what we get this time. So let's just show measurement annotations now. So I think that looks more realistic to me. That seems to there seems to be less rubbish there now, doesn't there? In some ways, it doesn't look so pretty because we're sort of randomly marking it, but I think we're pulling out the true positives more, aren't we? Does that look more realistic now?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say we were happy with that. We could go on tweaking it a bit more. But let's look at what else. And as I said, probably to tweak more now, I would suggest either marking up areas on other sections on this slide or on other slides, these little areas, going back into Histoquant, loading in the algorithm and see how it applies to those.
Yeah.
Or just maybe just measuring them and seeing how it applies to them. And then maybe you'll go, oh, it's pretty good on all of them, but maybe you'll go, oh, on some of the other samples, we need to go a little bit smaller or a little bit bigger, or we need to mark a little bit more brown or a little bit less brown or whatever. Okay, so what else can we look? We looked in measurement visualization before, so when we looked in the graph here, the other thing that this can be useful for is, so you know, remember I said it measures all that stuff, whatever you actually put in the output file. So say you came back in 6 months' time and you'd done lots of measurements on a whole bunch of these slides, and you said, actually, we've now decided actually that we're only interested in the positives that are below 45 microns squared or something. But you don't want to have to do all the measurements again. So what this allows you to go in is to sort of reanalyze the data a little bit, if you like. So for instance, if I click on an area and go histogram, and then hit show. So I said area just now. I can pick, there's a number of parameters here, so I can pick area, parameter, some of the intensities, for instance. So I can pick the area, for instance, and this is just showing me the distribution of the areas at the moment.
Yeah.
But say, as I said, say we now are only interested in the data for the smaller ones. I can go, for instance, use gates here, and then I can just drag this down and say I'm only interested in those ones there, for instance.
Okay.
And then what I can go is I can regenerate the data file, for instance, based upon that by selecting CSV file export and hitting go. I can also just review that with the go, so I can also jump to the gallery now. If I hit gallery there and hit go, I can now just review those ones, for instance. So this is also useful if we, say, just couldn't get the training, so we were completely happy with it, but we knew the reality of it was that it was a certain size population in the middle, but in order to actually get it to detect them all, we had to put a wider range in. You can use this, therefore, just to sort of gate down the data and go, well, actually, I know you're counting all those, and that's the way I got it to work, but just show me the data. So they can go in here just to review it again. But as I say, we can generate this, and we can go around this loop as many times as we like. So we can also, for instance, click on histogram and go to that and say, now do a secondary gate, but this time I'm only interested in ones where the perimeter is in a certain range. And so we can sort of hone down like that. Or we can do that in a secondary way, which is, if you know the two parameters, if you click the scatter plot, and say you say area and grey intensity, then so grey intensity is sometimes quite a good measurement just of the intensity of the staining.
Yeah.
So for instance, if you say, well, I've decided now I'm only interested in the ones which are below 49 microns squared and a darker, then you could, for instance, go, well, that's those ones there, and then again regenerate the data file or whatever. So does that seem useful, do you think? As I say, all that data is sitting in the background in the slide forever, unless you delete the measurements. So it's possible to do that. So I think the main thing we've not looked at is that data file output as well. So we just go to saving these on your folder on the server here. So you see here we've got one called regions and one called cumulative. So if we just have a look at each of these, so the regions one, has this computer got Excel or has it still got the 3D? Oh, it's still got the 3D. Okay, so these files that it generates are what are called CSV files, comma summary. So it's a bit like an Excel file, but it's also compatible with a bunch of other software as well, stats packages and things. And they are all, what they're called semicolon separated. So I think in the very recent version of Excel, for instance, it automatically detects that and just sorts that out. Is this all sort of fairly familiar in terms of data from other bits of software and that sort of thing? Yeah, okay. So you see though, if it's not selected, it all just looks like a bunch of rubbish, and when you tell it that it's that, it puts it in columns, etc.
You guys warming up?
Oh, okay. Right. So this is the this regions one here is the one that gives you the individual data about each object, and there's nothing in it because we didn't measure it. We told it not to put anything in there. But then we tick the box to say generate file. So it's just generated a file with nothing in it. Okay. So this is the other one. So this is the area one. And because I think I must have ticked the box saying cumulative, it's just added it. So we've measured twice, so it's on the same thing twice. So you see here the name of the slide, where the measurement file is saved, the date of the measurement. We've only got one layer here, just got layer 0 here, positive, we have more than one. And then here we've got an explanation of things we've been measuring, so the area, number of ticked objects, and this one over this one, which gives you the frequency of the ticked objects. So you see here, and we just need to, again, I think in proper Excel, I think it formats this properly, but so this will be -1, so this will be a field area of 0.54 millimeters squared, I think. We can check this. So, in fact, it'll tell us in here, won't it? So this area is 500,000 microns squared. That's about half centimetre squared, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. So apologies. You will need to do something if Excel doesn't do it automatically for you, just to format this way. This is the area is about half centimetre squared. There's 42 objects. You see the second time it's less because we tweaked it, and the frequency has therefore gone down. So you can imagine if we had all those other parameters there, or if we'd marked lots of areas, each one would be a separate area. So does that give you the sort of thing you're after, you think? Yeah? Okay, so the final stage is let's say we've tweaked it on a number of different slides, and now we want to mark up a bunch of different slides, etc., or a bunch of different annotations on different slides. So let's just simulate that now, and then we can get rid of it again so it's not there. So let's say, for instance, we've marked some areas on different ones here, and then did we have a second slide from you?
I think it's gone in the I don't have.
Not here. No. Okay. Well, so we've marked some areas there. So if you just work processing on one slide, you can just go back in where we were before, and just say I want to do that one, that one, that one. Say I just want that one, and run it, and it will run on all those areas. Yeah. Or I spoke about batch processing before, which lends itself, which is where you've got multiple slides. So we can sort of pretend this. So say, we haven't got it here. You need to have it here. So yours is. Are these pointing at a local drive or Roger or the network?
They're all local ones.
Okay.
There's no network.
Okay, so I'll just temporarily put that in. So what I can do. You select the slide here, so that's the one we're working on at the moment. Hit the plus sign. Let's just pretend that that was one of your slides as well. It will make complete rubbish. So we add them into the list there. If you click on a folder and then click plus, it will add all the ones in the folder. And if you click on the little image analysis icon here, what that will do is that brings it up. So you've got each of the slides here that I've selected. So there's only 2. I can select all if you like, or I can delete one. What we do is you're creating like a job list here.
Yeah.
So this is the first one. You can do the whole slide. You can do every annotation, or you can select them, or you can go on that one. If I hold down Control or Shift, like that, I can select them. And then you say which algorithm. It's not showing your algorithm here at the moment. It's not been used in here before. So I just need to add that. And then I can select yours there. And then when I click Add, so we've created 3 jobs in the list there. All that slide, those annotations with that algorithm. So you can imagine that different people's slides can be put in the list with different algorithms. So I could then go that slide, and we could say on that one, luckily there's an annotation, but we're going to run that one for the sake of argument. And then I can say what sort of output files I want, whether I want all the data to go into one file or separate files, tell it where to put it. And then when I click batch processing there, it will just sit there and chug its way through all those annotations and all those slides. So that's, as I say, I think in the real world you're likely to mark up about 10 slides, whatever, aren't you? And then leave that to go. What you can do is, there's nothing to stop you while that's running. Please specify destination for it. Just put it on the desktop now. Yeah, you can flip back to here and you can still play with slides and leave that running in the background, etc. I'll stop that.
So how do you get those? Just go through,
I'll go back through that. I'll go back through that. Yeah.
When you've got them all, I know how to get them all in that box on the bottom, on the
On the left.
Yeah. How do you get into that?
So we'll put some slides in again. It's this one here. So it looks a little bit like this one. It's multicoloured.
Okay.
It's the little. You put your mouse over here. It says image analysis modules.
Okay. Cool.
If you do a quarter measurement, either in the batch processing or in the other screen here, it will have saved whatever you got up to. So if you aborted it because you realise you got in complete rubbish using the wrong algorithm or something, then just as I showed you earlier, you can just go back and delete them here. Either delete all of them, or you can select specific ones to delete. Okay, does that all make sense and seem useful at the moment? Make sense to you, Roger? Was there anything, when you were playing before, was there anything specific that came up in terms of questions? Or?
No, I mean, it's just not very intuitive.
No, it's once you know how it works.
When you think you've started it,
and
you think, oh, it'll pop up on the thing, and it doesn't. So you have to click on the little I button to get it.
Oh, because they're all saved with different layers. And that sort of thing. So, shall we have a look at one of your slides now? And then maybe after that we can look at that
definitely.
Other one. Yeah. Okay. So, when I close this, everything is saved in the slide anyway. So this was one of yours, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So we just wanted to know, in this whole area here, how much of it is red, weren't we? Okay, so let's for just training purposes, first of all, let's just select an area that's got some red and some other stuff. So, would you expect this red staining here to be the same as this red staining here in terms of colour and intensity?
It will be different intensity.
Oh, I can see that this is lighter, isn't it?
These, I mean, I wouldn't want really to count that.
I'll check. You wouldn't want to count these bits in the middle?
Basically, I don't know whether it's because this is a ring and I I only want to count what's in the ring. This is a lumens. Either I didn't cut these, but it'll be something either on the side.
Okay, I think the way we can do that then is what we could do is we could mark a ring around the outside and then mark the inner ring as well, as it were. And what we'll have to do, I think, is 2 counts and just take one away from the other, if that's okay.
Yeah, because on a lot of them, on some of the slides, there is stuff in the middle. So
there are plans, and hopefully at some point there'll be an update which will allow you to sort of do exclusions or do more complex shapes, such as mark a donut, because it's quite a common request. But at the moment, so let's first of all though, let's just so this area here, for instance, got a good range of reds, and it's got some yellow as well, so we can see how. Okay, so let's just call that HQ frame. I'll create a new profile. Let's see what effect these have first of all. So this can be potentially, in this sort of thing, using this sort of blurring can be potentially useful, because if you look at it unblurred, yeah, there's real differentiation between the different shades, but we don't really care about that. We just want to try and see it as one object, don't we? So what sometimes helps is by just sort of blurring them into one, but the next step it will be easy just to identify that as one object. What are we really? What about when we look at things like this? Are we interested in this red as well? Where's our sort of our threshold, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't really want to count. I mean, this is the lamina, these sort of.
So how do you do it manually at the moment?
We've not quantified.
Okay. So let's have a look at that.
I just normally put the pictures.
So what would you call the red layer? We'll just call it red if you like. Yeah. And we'll change the marking colour to something other than red, because it will be difficult to see what's going on otherwise. And let's just start clicking on some of this and seeing what happens. See what happens if we do fill. That's probably a good thing, isn't it? I think. Yeah. If I go mark too much, tell me. What about all this? This is all positive, yeah? And this? Yeah. Oops. Oh. Luckily we have undo. Maybe I'll click. What's that? Okay. So what I could try here, maybe, let's just try reducing the picker size down a bit so we're a bit more precise in where we're clicking. Yep. It doesn't like that, does it? Let's try turning off fill. That's better, isn't it?
Quite a lot under that top bit.
Yeah, but it is. Okay, so let's go back. So let's just zoom in a bit. Okay, so I guess here we need to be careful to do like this, but not this, don't we? Okay. But we're still marking this. This is not red, is it really? Saying that, if you actually to look at it, this is.
Yeah, a little bit.
this is like this is the same colour as this, isn't it? Tell you what, as we're doing very much quite a strong colour here, let's just try it in RGB. So it just warns you that if you change it or forget, it will just start from scratch again. So let's do it like this.
Is this something that might benefit from being done in a grayscale where you can select? Yellows are lower.
It might benefit from that, but unfortunately you can't do that.
Right. What should I do? It's one of those things, it's either one thing or the other, isn't it?
Yeah. This red was true as well, wasn't it? This stuff here.
Yeah.
This is looking a bit more hopeful, maybe. So as soon as you try to do this lighter stuff, it picks up all this, doesn't it? It's quite red. Yeah.
I mean, probably this stuff here I could probably ignore, but this
This is
definitely
definitely,
like.
isn't it? Yeah.
It looked like when you fill it in there.
It's just like that. So the whole thing, apart from these really white bits, are being filled up.
We were actually selecting a different area to train.
Yeah, I was just wondering about that. I was just wondering whether that, or maybe something like this. The other thing I was wondering was maybe this is having too much of an effect. Yeah, it is. Oh no, I haven't got this yet. Red and yellow are obviously very close to each other in the colour spectrum. Okay, let's pick a different area. I'd have said, on initial inspection, I'd have said this would be the easy one compared to yours, but obviously not. Let's try this area. What time are we at now? Okay. Have you said that?
At one. Yeah. At one.
Okay, okay, I was just thinking, make sure we cover what you need to know.
Oh no, it's right, no, don't worry about it. I've learned a lot as it is anyway, so cool.
What does that happen? What does that do here? Okay, let's leave those up for now. This is all true though, isn't it? Is there any is this negative here or? Is there anything in amongst this that you wouldn't really say?
So which bits? It's not counting the bits within there.
So that's
I think under here. Like those lines there.
Other lines aren't being, so, oh, okay. Oh, I see, these lines should go all the way down, shouldn't they?
Yeah, what's underneath there?
But the strips down the middle should be. Is that closer? Yeah, so that's... How's that?
Yeah, that's the right one.
Okay. I have a horrible feeling when we was running on the other bit. It's going to go wrong. And I think filtering by size is going to help here, to be honest. Okay, let's just run it on a bigger area and see what we get. All you're interested in is total area, mask area, and what percentage that is in the whole thing. That's what we've done. Do you have a folder on the server? Oh, I'll tell you, I'll put it on your little,
Yeah.
I'll put it in here. So now, let's, what about this stuff out here? Would you measure this or only within the actual?
Yeah, probably. Like, if I was going to draw it by hand,
Yeah,
probably.
you draw around so that
yeah.
you treat this as stuff that's fallen out. Don't worry too much about how accurate I'm doing. Just want to see roughly what it does for now.
I'd be quite happy just to get a result.
Okay, so at the moment it's going to measure the stuff in the middle. Let's worry about that later.
There isn't a way to delete something from a scanned image, is there?
No, you can mark. You can export annotations back to the original slide format, so you can take out a subset of the data, and then so that's effectively like what deleting is.
I was just thinking about deleting those three little blobs in the middle.
Because I guess, not now, but like if I was doing it myself, you know the way you draw a mound? I guess I could get back to the beginning and go in, and then I could go around like that today, and then like, so making like...
I've never tried that. I'm not sure that would work.
Yeah, put in through all this.
Yeah, maybe that would work. Yeah, we could try that. So especially if you did it on a yellow bit, you wouldn't care what it did in there, would you?
Or one of those sort of pinched in bits or something across them.
I have a horrible feeling the whole ring's going to come up as marked. Did I run the right algorithm there? No. I ran your cell counting and funny enough it's found no brown positive cells on there.
Well, that's That's good to know.
Yeah.
It's a result.
Yeah. Your sample is not at all positive for the wrong type of cell.
It's good to know it's not brain.
Let's try again, shall we? Probably generated some silly data files here as well. Yeah. Oh, now it's going to go take longer because it's actually finding something to do. Oh, maybe not. You can see with this though why batch processing is useful.
Yeah.
You don't want to have to sit here, wait for this to finish, and then mark up another one and just mark them all up in one go. That was scanning earlier, and we were playing, and nothing went wrong.
No, but it's only one slide.
It was only one slide.
It's, the rest of the 4 times 6.
Right. I have put on both updates to the drop. Basically, the problem ended up being with the frame grabber card, and we've got you to change the settings in a file somewhere, I think, that were the first stage to fix that. What I've now put on is updated drivers now from the manufacturer, which is supposed to eliminate the problem. And I've also put on the very latest version of the software.
Don't worry, you will be getting a phone call if it goes wrong.
I'm sure I will.
When's it due for a service?
It's one of those funny ones. In theory, there's not a service in the first year, but there's a service in the service contract, isn't there? We're still learning a little bit with the 250s as to how often it depends how much use they get. But there's not a great deal of service unless it starts going on to it.
No. But it sort of squeaks a bit when it's taking in the trays.
I find they all make a slightly different noise.
And it's sometimes when it takes in slides.
And it doesn't seem to relate to whether
very
it works or not.
Not nice noises,
But it doesn't jam. Right?
Occasionally it might, or it might. It has snapped one off a slide before now.
Okay.
Generally, it's if I've missed a big blob of mountains or something that's.
Yeah. Time to worry is if you can't find a reason for it to doing it. If you look at it and you go, oh, the cover slip's half off, something like that, then that's normally the reason. I'm wondering whether this slowness here might well have been helped by your idea of sort of eliminating the middle. Yeah. It's a shame. In fact, it seems to have done almost the opposite of what you wanted to do, doesn't it? So this is all fault. This is all negative, isn't it? This is negative. This is negative. That's another way to look at it. If we can get it to reliably identify, if we can get it to reliably identify the yellow, that gives it the same answer, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what it looks like.
I'm not convinced that that's actually possible, given that it seems to identify red and yellow as the same thing anyway. But let's just have a try of that. One last doing.
This is what it does when it, if you ask it to do the whole slide, it gets to whizzes along to a certain point and then it just holds at that position and doesn't do anything.
Well, there's plenty of memory, and it's not flashing the processor.
How many sections does it say it's got to?
Oh, looks like it's finished. It's gone away. That means it's finished. It was hovering on, it had one left. I better click things too quickly. Yeah, let's see if let's try doing the inverse of what we want to do. So this is all completely negative, isn't it? Okay.
You've got muted it, right?
Well, that's seen DSS for like what it is.
Well, make sure before you go, we'll have a quick look at that other scan slide we did.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, too.
Just to see if it's useful.
Yeah. Go and show that to Simon and be like, go through that. That's all I want to do.
Right, so I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll just do this as a second layer in the same one, because then we can sort of compare. So that's what it's detecting in the existing one. So that was supposed to be red. This one will make yellow. So in this case, it's going to be everything apart from the white background, really, isn't it? What are these dark bits here? Is that a fold?
It folds.
Okay.
I had to do a lot of scraping on these slides. It wasn't Becky's fault. It's all Arvin's fault. The GT make a right pair. It's really put on it. It's really put on it. It just puts GT.
Oh,
Rather than use his proper name, let's call him that.
let's just try it on this area. And just see if it differentiates at all between the red and the yellow in that area. I'll tell you what actually what we should do is delete the existing measurement, because otherwise we'll see one on top of the other, we won't be able to tell what was from what.
If I can't get to do it, I could maybe just do that to stuff.
I suppose, I mean, how many of these sort of samples have you got to, are you likely to analyse in the long term?
I'd only do one section per slide, but I've probably got
Oh, that's interesting. So, the yellow is the red layer, but the blue is the yellow layer. Does that make sense? So, that's interesting here, because look, we've got this, but it does seem to have ignored the red.
Yeah.
With this, you've got this bit round here, it's basically every bit of tissue has come up in the yellow layer, which is what it was doing before. But the red, the thing marked in blue does have the look of, although, what would you call, this is positive, isn't it? So it seems to be just marking this bit here and some little strips in the middle. So that, okay, so let's try that then. So I tell you what, let's, why don't we,
and if I did that funny marking thing where I marked both the whole, just excludes the middle, because
yeah.
that's probably quite a fairly accurate area.
Why don't we get rid of the red layer completely now? So it's just, so we've just got the yellow one there. And we want to know total area, mask area, and relative mask area. And basically the inverse, the opposite of that. 1 over that percentage will give you what you want. Call this one the yellow measurement. Now let's run that on the whole ring. Let's see what it does.
Put snow outside you.
I don't know, I was thinking that.
No, it would be fine.
I don't know, windows in it, but oh. Yeah.
We had a decent amount of snow a couple of years ago. I drove into work.
You know, I've not a lot of snow in January. I was on holiday in January when it snowed before, so I don't know.
We haven't had any snow, proper snow. It was quite deep. I came into work and was
That's a lot.
and they said, you can go home again.
So that, I would say, is getting closer.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Because it's largely, it needs a bit of tweaking, but it's largely ignoring the positive
What
stuff,
are the
isn't it?
dots? Are they like excluding bits? What it's doing? It's fine, just.
It's really slow, isn't it?
Alright, the tiny doesn't. Doesn't need to be that.
No. Can't remember. I think I've got fill turned on. I think I've not got fill ticked. I think if you ticked fill,
Right.
that would become one big area. But I think I left it unticked was because it was starting to fill in other bits that you didn't want otherwise.
Well, that looks good.
But so what does it say in the data file? Yellow measurement. That's the one.
Really, your teacher's pet after this.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Just type this one.
So the yellow is 12. Oh, remember we've got the big bit in the middle at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, is 12%, which makes the red. No, that's not right. Oh, the red's not going to be 88%. It's because you've got to take the bit in the middle. Yeah. So what time is it? Is that moving in the right direction?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's have a quick look at this other slide. Oh, I saved it into your folder, didn't I? I think. Remember where I saved it?
Yeah.
Maybe E. Okay. Right, so what you're seeing at the moment is, as you would see with a normal scan.
Yeah.
So So you've seen some more in focus than others.
Yeah.
If I either move this slidey bar here or hold down Control, no, Shift, hold down Shift and move the mouse wheel.
Yeah.
Then you see we're going. So if you look at these here, for instance.
Yeah.
So you're going up and down through the focus stack.
Okay.
And if I press this one here, which is the extended focus button.
Yeah.
That tries to just flatten it all out. Does that? I don't know whether that's making. Does that make a difference?
Sorry, I didn't see that.
So that's your what you'd see in a normal capture.
Yeah.
So some are sharper than others, obviously.
Yeah.
This one
Yeah,
tries to flatten it all out. I don't know whether it may need to capture in a little bit more depth.
Yeah.
Those are the same blobs that you want to count over.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now this does bring a question to mind, which I don't know the answer to. But I need to find the answer to. Which is, if you would allow to do histoquant on this, would it do it on the centre layer or would it do it on the extended focus image?
Yeah.
Because you want it to do it on the extended focus image.
Yeah.
As I captured it at the moment, see there is a second, you can, when I captured it here, I did a Z stack. If you set this to extended focus, then it still does the Z stack, but it throws all the other layers away and just keeps the information related to the sharp cells. So then you'd think it's got to do it on the extended focus because it hasn't got any choice. But anyway, the real question here was, does it add anything really by doing it that way? Is it me or is this sample just nicer than the one we were working
Yeah,
on?
yeah, definitely. Oh, yeah. It's like forebrain, so there's no that particular nucleus in it. So it's good. I don't like triangles.
The other one seemed more browny, whereas this one seems more sort of a black stain, isn't it?
Yeah.
This in some ways looks like, even with a single layer, like it would probably be easier to set up Histocom for anyway.
Yeah,
so would you count, what about all these? Would you count all these normally?
I don't know, I'd have to talk, like I say, I'm not talk to Simon about it. Probably, if I was looking down the microscope, so say, like, things like that one I would do.
Yeah.
These shadows, I'd usually ignore. I kind of set myself a bit of a threshold.
So as I said, my argument would be that, well, what's this cut at?
30.
30. And is that because it's difficult to cut it thinner, or?
Yeah, they start doing it, they start text, we do free searching,
Okay.
I could do it on the slide, but if you've got 24 frames, and it's whole brain, it'd take forever.
Okay. Then my argument is to say is if you just ignore the out focus ones, it's a bit like going into the section.
Yeah.
On these ones, I also wonder whether, when you're setting it up for this stage, sliding these, the one that takes the noise and blurs it all the way to the right, might help a bit more because it might just push these outfocus even more into the background.
Yeah.
So you only can. I mean, saying that, if you were only to click on when setting it up the nice dark ones, then they're clearly a different colour to these anyway, aren't they? So if you decided that just counting the nice dark ones still gave you the right trend between really positive samples and negative samples and control samples and all that sort of thing, then that might be good. Okay, based on everything we've done so far, are there any specific questions or anything particular you want to go over again? Or?
I don't think so. I think it's a case of going away and trying it yourself, and then when you realise what you've forgotten, coming back.
Well,
there's printed out version of the manual on the top there.
Oh, good. I meant to bring that with me. I have another copy. So, do you want? Well, I mean, I'm up down to Manchester quite a lot. So maybe what we could do is you guys could play for a while, and then if Roger lets me know that you're struggling with something in particular, then when I'm next in Manchester, we can have another little short session or something.
The other thing is we do have TeamViewer on the computer.
Oh yeah, so I can help you remotely as well. Yeah.
Okay.
So if you have a problem, you
can. I can sit here. And I can take control, or you can point things out to me and stuff.
You can give
Roger
a ring or something.
That's a good point. Yeah, we can do that anytime you like.
Yeah, cool.
Well, apart from when the M6 at high speed. Okay, is that enough for now then, or is it going to be overloaded if we carry on any further? So I think the main things are you have to mark what you do what you're going to measure. You then want to select areas of no bigger than about 300 micron squares, and I'll show you like the tools to measure. But one way to look at it is 1-to-1. It's about the screen area.
Yeah.
And train it. And if you want to make it more resilient, you need to sort of revisit your training with a few areas and different slides to try and level it off, as it were.
Yeah.
I mean, it depends to a certain extent how accurate you need to be. If for you a positive is everything above 1,000 positive nukes on a sample, and a negative is, and therefore it doesn't, and you can accept any count between 800 and 1 million as being a positive, then you might not bother.
Yeah.
But if a 1 or 2% swing either way matters to you, then you might want to tweak a bit more. And then you've got things to remember is, especially when you reopen a slide, it doesn't show you anything. So you've got show annotations and show measurement annotations. Just shows you the measurements. Oh, there aren't any on this slide, are there? Shows you those measurements. And you've got the Excel files that come out, which are your raw data, and you've also got the measurement visualization, the little graph button, which allows you to go in and either look at the gallery to review what's been, show you all the objects in one place, or the histograms and the scatter plots where you can re-gate the data to say I'm only interested in certain size or whatever, and either to help you set it up or to regenerate the data file with a subset of the data in or something like that. Okay, if that's okay then we'll stop for now. Yeah. Shall I stop this thing recording now?
Yeah, that's right.
Quite long enough already, I think. Is there anything else? Any other questions you have at the moment?
No, the only things that were separate to this were just about the...
Okay, well we can do that separately. We can do that separately then, yeah. Okay, I've got your hard disk here. So your stuff, everything we've done with you is in your network drive.
Yeah.
And your stuff is on your hard drive, yeah.
I don't remember deleting your folder, so...
I think because you said to me to delete them when I put them up, I think I must have deleted the folder from the network.
And that pink one that I just saw there, that looks a bit easier again because there's only really one colour to measure there. So
yeah, it's when you zoom in close to the purple nuclei, but it should be...
Oh, sorry, that was counting, not the whole area, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was counting, but it should be...
Do you want to have a quick look at that now? Which one was that? That was on the hard drive, wasn't it? Yeah.
So now that, I just get my slide up machine.
Oh, sorry, I'll do that now.
Yeah.
There's a terrible spelling mistake inside here as well.
Where's that?
Length.
Hungary English. I'm going to check my demo system, so I swear mine doesn't say that. I always find I always get to the point where I say, yeah, it's written down here what the acceptable slides are, and that's always right.
Boy, it's a little bit trigger happy with things.
Have you modified this? Nope. I thought there was some regulation that said we had to make it clear. I like it a bit if you hold it open for it to stay.
Yeah,
It's a real pain
like that.
otherwise. Yeah, okay. Let's not
I
worry
like
about that.
what's going on when I'm doing the slides in
Okay, so
in case something goes a bit
Let's
wrong.
have a look at
So I can see what's happened.
where's it gone? It was this one.
The one MO5.
That one.
Yeah.
Oh, so rather than doing pink area, we're doing blue cells.
Yeah.
Okay. But not when they're in a fold. You know, I've got to go down to the pattern for something in a bit, but that's not till later.
Does nuclear quant do the same as this, but just on fluorescence?
No, nuclear quant is bright field,
Is it?
and it's really, you can quantify a little bit, but it's really very much intended for with brown and blue immunostains.
Right.
So what it does is it does colour deconvolution first, so it divides it basically into the blue and the brown. Blue is taken to be the nuclei, is then analysed on morphology like circularity and size and that to identify the nuclei.
Right.
And then within the boundaries of the nuclei, it quantifies the intensity of the brown stain in there so that you can drop it into classes like weak, medium and strong brown staining.
Right.
It's very specific really to some clinical assays and a few research ones which happen to work the same way. See, on this sample you can see the effect of this more, because you can see that when I do that, it really does make the sort of those pink ones just more individual and sort of less noisy around the outside. Let's pick a different colour. So I definitely have fill on for something like this. What about these little things like this?
Yeah, I'd say.
These little dots like this we can get rid of. Is that okay? What about what's going on here, do you think?
I probably would.
We can probably get rid of that based on size though. What about here? That's one there, isn't it? I'll tell you what, if I do this it might be easier because it's been blurred.
Oh yeah, no it is definitely.
That's better, isn't it? But probably these little dots we want to get rid of. I would guess these are about 30 microns squared. So let's try 15. Maybe I've got that wrong. No, there's a small one. Is that one there? Sort of this sort of thing.
Yeah.
What do you do at the moment? Just set a clicker counter or?
Yeah, I've done sort of some things on a mistake, but this is the first time we've done. It's like for a big animal to release
So the small one's 21, the smaller one's 60. Let's try something like 50 to 75, 15 to 75.
I think you say throughout it's not sticking.
What's not sticking, sir?
Snow.
Oh!
It's all melting. Still snowing, but it's not sticking on the road.
These are positives, aren't they?
Yeah.
So actually they're smaller. But how's that? Yeah?
Yeah.
And you don't want to measure anything else, just that?
No,
Yeah. Right, have we got anything sort of... What about with these ones? Do you get much sort of sitting on top of each other or joining up? I don't see any examples
really.
here. Okay. And again, do you want to know anything about the individual nuclei or just... Okay. Just have field area, number of objects again.
So you can be sat on my computer for the next week or two now then.
Okay, so let's run it on a bigger area, see what we get.
Yeah.
I wonder what happened if we just run it in this annotation number 2. Let's see what happens. Might or may not be a good idea.
Go on, be a devil.
Yeah, because if it works, it's a bit easier for this one, because I don't have to draw around the
It's not yellow measurement though, it's cell counts. Do you have an idea of what you might expect as a number for this? Oh, it looks fairly good. Yeah. What's going on there? Maybe. I think that's not too bad at all.
Yeah.
That is quite good, I think.
Yeah.
I'll give you the number here. I can't remember. No, I mean. $1,397. Could be good, could be bad. Yeah.
Different treatment for it, so.
Yeah. Well, that looks pretty helpful anyway, doesn't it? Yeah.
I think sitting and counting sounds themselves, isn't it? Oh my god.
Yeah, no, that in areas like this where there aren't any, it doesn't really. It's a little, what's going on these little bits here? I don't know what that is.
No.
The area is very small. Area of the actual detected thing is 8, 9. What did we set it at?
5.
Okay, 9, 28. So those are all good, I think, aren't they? Those are good. Most of them are good.
No.
That's small again. We need to put the size criteria up, I think. Yeah. What did she say at 5, did we say?
Yeah.
I think it needs to go up to about 12, 15 or something. 15, 18. Well, that's true, isn't it? That's 11. Up a little bit then, but not too much. Depends if the percentage error is very low, you could go, I don't care, couldn't you?
Yeah.
Okay. Right. You want your hard disk back, I guess?
Yes, please.
That one.
That one, yeah.
Hope I don't have files open. Come on, let me do that. Sometimes Windows doesn't want you to take away the hard disk.
So when's the Mac version coming out?
The Mac. What's the answer to that? So,
Thanks very much.
the new viewer is largely tied at the moment to using it as case center, which is the server-side stuff. The current question mark is is over the availability of a standalone version of the new viewer. This new viewer, which is quite nice actually, at the moment though, runs on the PC, but I'm reliably informed that the way it's being written, we could compile it to the Mac tomorrow if we wanted. We could send you one to run on your iMac if you wanted. Go on then. No, we're not going to do that, because what we're doing is we're getting all the features fully finished in one version, and then we'll compile it to the other platforms. But so
there's quite a few people that doing this or do have Macs. So.
It's supposed to be this year. I'm actually over in Budapest next week, so hopefully I'll get an update then. I was at the corporate picture in the presentation, and now there's lots of programs in the real picture. Okay, well you guys have got, Roger's got my details, so if there's any little questions, don't hesitate to ask. And as Roger said, even when I'm not up here for a while, it's quite easy to do a remote session on here as well, where we can both see the slide at the same time and see if we can help and that sort of thing.
Cool.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah.
Well, we got most of the results you wanted, I think, didn't we? Yeah.
Just let me know if you want to use the computer. So. We've only got the one dongle, so.
Okay,
Yeah, so before coming here, mark off all your areas of interest first of all.
Yeah.
And then come here.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
I don't know if it's something else. Are we supposed to sign up to it? When I tried to book Helmet again, it said you do not have permission.
From Monday next week.
Oh, right, next week.
The high-end wide deal to be on the new booking system.
Oh, right, okay, so should I book?
You need to sign forms.
I booked for Monday, like last week, but then I just wanted to extend it a bit.
Well, it will be, because there won't be any
No,
bookings.
Okay, that's fine.
So if you want to, you'll need to pop down, because we'll need to put you onto the system and everything. So if you want to pop down this afternoon or something, you can. We'll need to read through some forms and sign it and stuff. All the systems will be going on it eventually, but we're doing it in phases. All right.
Cool, that's great. Thanks very much.
No problem. Right, so crashing, I think, is just as always the case as here it goes. But it has now got the updates, every update possible applied to the crashing originally, and also at the same time the latest release version of software that's going on the systems coming out back later. Change-wise, I think change-wise, most of the changes in this software related to fluorescence. Focus algorithm, I think it's changed. There's nothing outwardly to see, but it's supposed to be better, so it should be a good thing. You'll notice in automatic mode, I'll show you in fact. If you want to
That's it, it's crashing quite regularly at the moment.
Yeah, I'm hoping that will go away now.
And anything that...
To be honest, we had some of the first two updates I put on today, I've had for a while, but to be honest, because there was no complaint, we kind of tend to take the attitude that if it's all working, leave it alone.
Right.
Oh, sorry, that's the one I borrowed out of here.
Oh, right, that's fine.
I was just testing it.
Yeah, that's right. I was just going to say,
the
noise it makes when it's taking in the slides.
Let's just open it up and just watch as it goes in and just see what's doing.
There's a stick there that I've been using, especially designed for the purpose. And it seems to like it's straining when it takes it in.
Okay. Oh, I'm automatic make it. Oh, when I'm an automatic make it, just change it. So you'll see this continuous scanning thing here. So this is what was always there. I think I might have had slightly different words before. Anyway, you can see it first and last slide. This is a new feature. I've not even played with this myself yet. But basically the principle here is that you can keep putting more magazines down here while it's running. It's reliable, of course. There's two things to bear in mind though. Number one is because you're doing that and it keeps running, it will just be running whatever scan profile was when you started it. Because it's really intended for clinical use. where you've got barcodes A to name the slides, and B, you're probably also going to infer the scan profile somehow from the barcode. So I don't know whether it's really any interest even in this situation or not, but that's what it's all about. Anyway, apart from that, I don't think you'll notice any changes outwardly. There's changes internally, so there's lots of changes on the fluorescent side, but we haven't got that. So let's just go into here. That particular one is about as smooth as it gets.
It sounds alright.
Yeah.
Pop in that yellow one that's on there.
Sticking out top a little bit. That end I think should be alright. Contact is down the side.
I mean, I've scanned that one before, so. It's a thicker slide or something. Definitely collecting detritus in there.
Yeah. I've seen a lot worse, to be honest.
Well, I do, some of them, people's cover slips on them.
I've got one customer, I'm not sure actually how they do their staining or something, but they seem to end up with crap on the bottom of the slide and back of the side. So I keep telling them to clean them, but they don't clean them, and you just see it all scraping off from here.
Very different. They're not the same road.
I'm just checking because if you get one of the more common issues I've seen is if you get rubbish, this clip mechanism for holding the slide, you can get even small bits of glass or whatever in behind it, and if it doesn't work smoothly anymore, and what you find then is it's not gripping the slide properly, and that leads to either slides appearing out of focus, and things vibrating as it's moving around, or maybe loading and unloading problems. But that was, when it occurs, it's obvious because you find the slides loose in a hole.
Yeah, well that slide this morning,
Yeah.
The motor sounded like it was strained when it took it in, but it sounded alright this time.
Let's just check in. I mean, there is this I'm sure you've seen when you're having real problems. Well, you've already seen that was crashing, not loads of problems. It does seem to monitor the strain on the motors to a certain extent, because if you get a real genuine jam, it seems to get to a point where it says no, this isn't good enough, and it just stops all the motors, and you get that one about. It's normally one about the slide arm.
I've had that before. And the other problem I get, it's not a problem yet, but I'm sure it will be at some point. It's not till sort of afterwards, you know, people give you stuff that isn't set properly, so you get stuff stuck in the bottom. So I occasionally have to get in there with a scalpel and scrape things out. But trying to be careful not to scratch the
I was going to say, yeah, the worst place to scratch is here. Because I have seen on these same racks I think are using the older scanner, and I've seen on the ones that are quite old, problem where you eventually get a bit of a groove in the bottom there, and then they have to be replaced because as the slide comes back out, it catches in there.
Well, sometimes you
It
get
takes
lumps
quite a lot of wear to do that.
stuck up on the fins and try and knock it off. Otherwise the slides don't sit in there properly. But that's our problem, not the machine's problem really.
No, I mean, as I said, I think having someone like the scanners that run smoothest, so where there's someone who sort of is overall responsible for it and monitors the quality of the slides going in and out and that sort of thing. The ones where we have most problems, where there's just random people coming along all the time.
Well, we don't let anybody.
Well, I had one a couple of weeks ago, and they'd had a new user, and they were putting all these slides in where the cover slips were jutting completely off the side, and had massive glue, and they were also filthy. Anyway, you think, well, you wouldn't go on the microscope, and they sort of went, we've given them the induction. We didn't get around to giving them the induction before we let them use it. And you kind of think, well, you're sort of making your own grave there, aren't you?
But sometimes you might miss a bit, but it's where it sort of goes back through, where it draws it back through that bit. And if there's a bit of cover slip sticking up at the top, it might jam or it might just snap it off as it goes through. So generally, I check first if there's a bit of cover slip sticking off. I try and hack it off with a scalpel.
Okay, well, that seems to be quite smooth for now, anyway.
And somebody gave me a slide that had no cover slip on it at all. They put the mounting stuff on top and then the cover slip was completely missing. They still managed to scan it.
I've been surprised. I've had a few on demos where there's been, I'm not sure it's not massive, but you think these objectives in theory are not really designed for that, but quite often you get reasonable results. You sometimes get sort of a noisy haze, which I guess is something to do with the fact that their cover slip corrected and there's no cover slip.
Yeah, so the worst slides I've had in terms of not being able to scan them. Well, this girl, she came over for a day. I think.
These aren't these irises or whatever they are.
No, getting the box now. She came over for a day with some stuff she'd left. She was a postdoc and she'd left, and she'd given me these brain slices, which they weren't too bad. So they weren't too bad.
No.
And then she also gave me these other brain slices. She was trying to do all of this on an Activision microscope. There was no way that she was going to do it in one day. But they are.
Oh, there might be a tip on that.
The absolute worst one, I had to do that.
Yeah, no. It's a shame.
And it was just some brown staining, like dab staining in there. She wanted to pick up on.
Oh, of course it's not there. No. Just fine. I'm checking for dark field free. The functionality that's on there, if you have fluorescence, can be used in bright field, and it's the answer to these. Because these basically look like a fluorescent slide in terms of visual inspection, don't they?
Yeah, all she's done is labelled. She's done the dab staining, but she's not counter-stained it.
Yeah.
So it was an absolute nightmare.
One other idea. Because yeah, you've got with the fluorescent stuff, you've got this thing called dark field preview. And what that has is you have this piece here, and it shines like a sheet of light at the slide at an oblique angle, and it scans down it, and then the only light that therefore reaches the preview camera is stuff scattered by a physical sample. And then they do some maths and stuff, and they build like a preview image. And like that was just.
So it was the. Sorry.
Sorry.
Was it
Oh. So something message to answer in the background or something. Oh, there you go.
So this is probably the best of them actually, and that's.
So this sort of brown stuff is interesting, I guess.
That was it, but it was.
Yeah, it's difficult to focus on the other areas though, isn't it?
As I say, normally what people would do would be to counter-stain it, but she didn't.
Let's just have a look at the matrix.
I mean, we've passed it on now, so it's. Hopefully, we never get anything like it again, but.
And what's this? Is this just air bubbles?
Yeah.
Wow. So that's just asking for trouble to be honest, because the problem is this is by far the area. This is by far the best contrast on the whole slide.
Yeah.
So from an autofocus point of view,
it was just. Then she'd left the slides and then she'd gone back to Sweden.
Yeah.
And all I could do was, what I could do.
Yeah. The tissue's broken as well.
But I had to do each one manually.
Ooh. Yeah, I think if you ever have samples like this, sort of, with low contrast like this before, again, in this case, I think you could probably get cheat in some way, but if you didn't have the air bubbles, because if you do something like...
As I say, well, we managed to get something anyway, but it was a bit of an effort.
Yeah, I think without the air bubbles you could probably find a way, you could get it a lot easier, but with the air bubbles it screwed any chance you had of getting a threshold to work. So yeah, your idea of like doing little compartments with a pen is probably the best idea.
That's all I could do, that it just wouldn't do it for this.
No.
We would try and select the whole thing.
These are the air bubbles here, and they're sort of... Because what I have done with really difficult stuff before is I've actually... if you do this is unmarked. I've unmarked everything, and then if you dial this down, it sort of shows you what's going on. So when I've got it to a stage like this, I sort of then sorry, I obviously select the right one. I then marked them manually like this, using that yellow stuff as a sort of a guideline. So yeah, that still does work on this, but unfortunately, as you know, this must is only applicable to that slide. So you literally have to. I mean, you can, if you do this and save. So if you do this and save this or something, and then save the profile, you can therefore create a scan profile for each slide. So if you want to leave it to run overnight, you just sit there and you go S1 profile, S2 profile, and you load that in automatic mode on the basis that you don't have to then sit here waiting for it to finish the slide. So it is doable, but to say.
Well, hopefully we won't ever have
anything like that. But if you do, that's the way around it.
I mean, it would have been fine, except she didn't counter-state.
I've seen brain sections quite often not counter-state like that for some reason.
So the preparation wasn't the best anyway. I mean, half of that slide is an air bubble.
It's not even worth trying. You won't see anything down the microscope really, either, will you?
So she's given up science now.
Given up science.
She's working
She
as
started at some point.
she's working as a pharmacist now.
Yeah, I thought this wasn't right. Don't fiddle with it. You're not happy with it is, but I think what it is. Let's check. Yes, if you see these two here, at least if you compare the other ones on the other side are locked in position. That's what I thought. I'm pretty sure I've asked them, but I was telling the person, that's a real pain, keep closing. And I said, oh yeah, we've got something like that. Because you can stick your hand in there, and instead of doing yourself an injury, it's supposed to always close. But if you like it like that, I'm not going to notice. I'm not going to
No, it's always been like that.
Yeah, well, if you ever want to change that, it's just a case of typing this one. Right, if you've got no other questions at the moment, I'll run down to the past and look at their little issue.
Everything seems okay.
Can we just shut all this down?
Oh, you can leave it open, I've got some stuff.
Sorry, just close the scanner software, sorry. I'll stop and everything. Notice in the foyer there's all the stuff about sustainability. Do you guys have any separate budgets you can tap into at the university relating to sustainability? The stuff on microscope?
Not that I'm aware of. But
There's been pushing a bit at the moment with these. I don't really know. We've always had these. We call them LED based, but they've got more than just LEDs in them. We've always had the high-end multi-channel programmable ones. They've now brought out using the same technology, white light versions of them.
Peter did sort of look into. I think there was some money to make change the light sources.
Yeah.
From mercury lamps to LEDs or something.
Yeah.
But there was some money that it could have been done, but I don't think it was.
Well, one of the, with most of the other LED solutions out there, one of the situations, one of the pure LED, is that well, there's two issues. Really, number one issue is that in the sort of 500 to 600 nanometer bands, pure LED technology just doesn't have as much power as mercury and metal halide, so you end up with longer exposure times. And if you use, and also when you're using LEDs where you've got the blue one, the green one, the red one, and all this sort of thing, to actually cover the bit spectrum, you need 6 or 7 maybe, 6 or 7. Because otherwise you always end up with holes where there are filters that won't work or filters that won't work. So what this solution does is it answers that in two ways. A, it's got 6 sources in there which cover the bit spectrum. And in the white light version they're all just combined by dichroic. So you've got, it really is a slot-in replacement for the other ones. But it's about £4 grand for the cheapest one, which, given that there's never any bulbs to replace or anything, basically that's why I was asking about sustainability, because the manufacturers have got a lot of success in the States with it, in both commercial organisations and universities, where they haven't got any money for lamps, but then they find out the university's got a sustainability cushion or something, there's a separate fund, and if you call it sustainability and say we're going to, because you can also make saving electricity because you actually turn them on and off when you need them, because you can go, we're not using mercury, that's very dangerous. And we're not going to be buying more bulbs, that's 100 quid or 500 quid, depending on what sort they are. You can kind of go, well, it's a genuine sustainability solution. Yeah.
We've got some sort of LED things in.
Most people have some of the cool LED ones, which, to be honest, are okay, but so they're suffering power and they're suffering flexibility a bit because of the fact they don't cover out the wavelengths. Anyway,
Mention it to Peter. He's
I'm sure I mentioned it before. I'll send him. It has changed a bit recently, so I'll send him. I'll maybe drop him a note for the latest stuff on the web or something.
So he did look into it at one point.
Hopefully, touch wood, this will be a bit more resilient now. When if you have little things like that, do bounce me emails them because, as I say, sometimes we may have like we did sort of miss it. We may have something where we thought, well, if it's stable, let's not fiddle with it. But if it's not stable, we put this on. So.
Well, we were very busy last week. I had a big pile to put through, and we just had a few problems trying to do things at the same time. So I'll bring it up when you come up. But apart from that, it's all been fine. Touch wood.
Which can edit his video.